My name is Brianna Hayward. I'm 68 years old, and until 7 days ago, I thought I still had a home. Not just a house, not a roof and four walls, but a home. The kind built on laughter, shared meals, hard years, and soft Sundays. A place where every creaking floorboard whispered memories. But after 1 week away helping my sister Ruth recover from hip surgery, I returned home to find my entire life scattered across the front porch. 2 suitcases, 1 duffel bag. My umbrella leaning against the porch rail like it, too, had been exiled. And taped to the top of my old Samsonite was a note. A pale pink sticky note. I didn't even have to unfold it. I knew that handwriting. Curly, meet, smug. If you want to stay, there's a garage. Your dear daughter-in-law. I stood frozen, peace clutched in my hand, the heat of the summer evening making the words on the page blur. At first, I thought it was a joke. Maybe a tasteless prank by Clarissa, who always said I had no sense of humor. But one look at the stiff way my belongings had been arranged, like I was an old couch waiting for a thrift store pickup, told me this was no joke. I stared at the house. My house. The brick was aging but strong. Jeremy, my late husband, had painted the porch railing himself this summer before he got sick. He used to joke that this house had more memories than studs holding it up. And I believed him. We bought it in 1988. We raised our son, Darren, here. Hosted Christmases, birthdays, funerals, and one ill-fated neighborhood block party that ended with a flaming grill and a broken sprinkler head. I walked up to the door, my door, and tried the key. It worked. Inside, the air conditioning hummed quietly, but the house felt colder than ever. It looked like a hotel lobby. Sterile. Clean. Stripped of character. The floral throw pillows were gone. The family photo wall was reduced to just Darren and Clarissa's beach wedding portrait. Not even a picture of Jeremy remained. The scent was wrong too, like some perfumed reed diffuser had been stuffed in every corner to erase the smell of lemon cleaner I always used on Saturdays. I moved toward the kitchen. My favorite mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Mom," was gone. The little spice rack Jeremy had built for me as an anniversary gift was nowhere in sight. In its place stood a sleek black tray with matching herb jars labeled in pretentious gold cursive. I opened a cabinet. Everything was reorganized. My tea tins were gone. Even my favorite apron had disappeared from its usual hook. I called out, "Darren." No response. I moved through the hallway, my footsteps muffled by a new rug that wasn't mine. I opened the door to my room, the room Jeremy and I had shared for nearly 4 decades. Empty. Not just tidied. Empty. The bed was gone. The dresser. The floral curtains I'd sewn myself in '97. Every trace of me erased. In the corner sat a folding table with Clarissa's Peloton accessories. On the floor were yoga mats and a basket of hand weights. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor beside the closet. It, too, was bare. The place that once held my scarves, my winter coat, my wedding shoes tucked lovingly in a box, all of it gone. That's when the silence hit me. Deafening. Cold. I dialed the bank, numb fingers barely managing the numbers. The voice on the other end was polite, sterile. "Yes, Mrs. Hayward. The mortgage for 324 Rosemill Drive is still being paid monthly via direct debit from your checking account ending in 4192. There are no payments from the listed owners." Listed owners? Yes, Darren Hayward and Clarissa Hayward. I ended the call and sat in stunned silence, the phone sliding from my hand to the floor. I thought back how it all began. Jeremy had died of a sudden stroke 8 years ago. The grief swallowed me whole. I remember the ache, the suffocating silence of sleeping alone. Darren had been supportive at first. He said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that big house." Clarissa chimed in, "Let us help. We'll move in. We'll take care of it all." And they did move in. And they did take over room by room, inch by inch, until I felt like a guest. When Darren lost his job during the 2020 layoffs, I offered to help. "Let's put the house in your names," I said, naively, "so if something happens to me, there's no probate nightmare." "But you'll always have a place here, Mom," Darren had said, hugging me. "This will always be your home." And I believed him. But now, my bedroom was a yoga studio. My tea was missing. My suitcase was on the porch. And my place was apparently a garage. A laugh escaped me, sharp, dry, bitter. I'd made every mortgage payment since Jeremy died. Every. Single. One. Because Darren never quite got back on his feet, and Clarissa's online fashion consultancy was, at best, a hobby. They had their own credit cards, their own trips, their own remodels. And I, stupid old me, footed the bills. I thought I was helping. I thought I was family. I looked again at the note. If you want to stay, there's a garage. A garage. Not even a word to my face. Just ink and cruelty. I went back outside. My neighbors, the Thorns, were unloading groceries. Helen waved. Brianna, you're back. Want to come over for some peach cobbler later? I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, but I just nodded, blinking hard. Instead, I dragged my suitcases down the driveway and sat on the curb. The street lamp flickered above. I could hear the distant sound of children playing 3 doors down. This street had seen me raise a boy, bury a husband, plant trees, survive storms. And now it had seen me tossed out like a sack of old laundry. But as the evening deepened and the air cooled, something changed in me. The humiliation didn't shrink, but it sharpened. Focused. I may have trusted blindly, but I wasn't stupid. I stood, brushed the dust off my skirt, and looked back at the house. My house. They thought I was weak. They forgot who built this life, who paid for it, who held the keys. Well, they were about to remember. Because tomorrow morning, I was calling the bank. And they were going to learn what happens when you kick the wrong woman to the curb. I don't know what I expected when I finally mustered the strength to open the garage door. Maybe part of me hoped it was a mistake. That I'd find some temporary clutter, a misunderstanding, maybe a futon and a joking sign that said Mom's Suite. That Darren would come down the hallway, say, sorry, Clarissa overreacted. Let's get you back in your room. But no, what I saw was worse than anything I could have imagined. The door creaked open and the smell hit me first, damp concrete, old cardboard, and the faint chemical tang of bug spray. There, in the far corner beneath a single dangling bolt, was a thin twin mattress. No frame, no headboard. Just the kind of lumpy, sunken mattress you'd offer a dog that's aging out of its usefulness. A single pillow lay limp at one end, and atop it, a faded blue blanket folded too neatly, like someone had taken great care to arrange this insult into a presentation. Next to the mattress sat a lamp. Not a floor lamp, not a bedside table, just a cheap, bendable desk lamp from a dorm room, lying sideways on the floor with no outlet nearby. A tangle of cords sat in a heap unplugged. On the opposite wall stood a metal clothing rack, skeletal and spindly. 6 mismatched hangers hung on it, 1 plastic, 1 velvet for wire. The rest of the space was taken up by boxes. 4 of them. I didn't even need to check the labels. Mom's things. Black marker. Block letters. 1 word was all it took to erase my identity. Not Brianna. Not Mom's heirlooms or Mom's keepsakes. Just things. Objects. Storage. I backed out for a moment, into the dusk, into air that didn't taste like sawdust and resentment. I leaned against the siding and tried to steady my breath. I hadn't cried yet, not when I saw my suitcases, not when I walked into my stripped-down bedroom, not even when the bank confirmed what I already knew. I was still paying the mortgage on a house that no longer had space for me. But now, looking into that garage, I felt tears claw at the corners of my eyes. My phone buzzed. A text. It was from Darren. Don't complicate this, Mom. Just stay in the garage until we figure things out. No, hi. No, are you okay? No apology. Just a directive. As if I were an unruly item they were temporarily relocating to a less visible shelf. Don't complicate this. The words looped in my head like static. As if I were the one making things messy. As if this cruel demotion from matriarch to storage item was somehow the simpler solution. I went back inside. I needed air. I needed silence. I needed to sit. So I sat on the mattress. It groaned under my weight, the springs crying out with me. My back ached instantly. The garage was uninsulated, the cement cold enough to send a chill straight up my spine. A spider crawled lazily across the floor near one of the boxes. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared into the semi-darkness. And I remembered. I remembered Darren's second birthday, the way he screamed bloody murder when his balloon popped, and how I spent 30 minutes in the bathroom blowing up a new one with my lungs burning because I didn't want him to cry on his birthday. I remembered staying up until midnight making him a costume for a school play because the store-bought one itched too much. I remembered when Clarissa's mother had her stroke, and I volunteered to watch the kids for 3 weeks straight, no schedule, no thanks, just spit up and soggy cereal. I remembered when Darren lost his job after the merger and spent 6 months in a fog. I paid the utility bills. I took out money from Jeremy's old account to keep their car from being repossessed. I said nothing, not once, because that's what mothers do. I remembered how, when Jeremy died, I still made family dinners every Sunday. Still called Clarissa honey, even when she rolled her eyes at my tablecloths and complained about the smell of my chicken paprika. I remembered watching their children every time they had a date night, and the way Clarissa would sigh loudly if I stayed too long afterward, as if the woman who folded their laundry was just overstaying her welcome. And now, I was in the garage, because I was complicating things. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. I looked around the cold, damp garage and muttered aloud, "Well, this is neat. The family I raised has decided I'm clutter. And the worst part? Somewhere deep down, I had seen it coming. It had started small. Clarissa slowly redecorating. Darren forgetting to include me in dinner plans. The grandkids calling less. My mug disappearing from the cabinet. My quilt packed away. The couch I bought replaced by a minimalist modular piece Clarissa ordered online. A slow erasure. And I let it happen. I let myself be pushed into the margins because I wanted to keep the peace. Because I thought love was best expressed by sacrifice. But what happens when the people you sacrifice everything for decide you're no longer worth keeping? What happens when you become inconvenient? I couldn't spend another night in that space. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There weren't many left. Most friends had moved, gotten sick, or passed away. A few I hadn't spoken to in years. But there was one name, one lighthouse in this murky storm. Martha Kendall. We met 30 years ago at a PTA fundraiser. She had a voice like sandpaper and a laugh that could shake a chandelier loose. We raised our sons together, cried through our husbands' illnesses together, and once got kicked out of a church event for calling a deacon's casserole a culinary sin. I hit call. "Bree?" Her voice came quick and bright. "You back already?" I opened my mouth but couldn't speak. Just air. "Bree," she said again, quieter this time. "You okay?" I need a place to stay." "Just for a night or two," I finally said, the words barely above a whisper. Her tone changed instantly. "What happened?" "It's a long story," I said. "A long, stupid, ugly story. But I can't stay here. Not another night." "You come now," she said. "Guest room's got clean sheets. And you're not sleeping in a damn garage. I don't care what Darren's wife says." I laughed, half choked, half grateful. "You don't even know the half of it." "I don't need to. I know you. And if they think they can treat you like yesterday's trash, they're about to find out what a bad idea that is. Come on. I'll make tea." I stared around the garage one last time. I stood, picked up my purse, took nothing else. The house behind me was still. Not a light on. Not a word from Darren. Clarissa hadn't even had the decency to show her face. I stood at the end of the driveway and looked back at the structure I'd held together for decades. Let them have it. Let them choke on their marble countertops and handmade wreaths. They'd soon learn something I'd forgotten for too long. I wasn't weak. And I wasn't finished. Marty's house wasn't grand, but it was alive. It had soul. Faded floral wallpaper in the hallway, a clock that chimed 10 minutes too late, and a shaggy old dog named Peanut who limped when he got excited. It wasn't silence that greeted me when I walked in, it was warmth. And it nearly undid me. She took one look at me standing in the doorway, clutching my purse like a stranger in her own life, and wordlessly wrapped me in a hug. "I made lemon bars," she whispered into my hair. I didn't know why, but now I do. We didn't talk for the first hour. I sat at her kitchen table, eating lemon bars I could barely taste, while Marty bustled around making tea like she hadn't just rescued me from the coldest exile of my life. When we finally sat down in the living room, tea in hand, she didn't ask right away. She waited, like a good friend does. They moved me to the garage, I said quietly. She blinked. What? They emptied my room, put my things in boxes labeled Mom's things, left a mattress on the concrete and a broken lamp. Like I was a tenant. No, not even. Like I was junk. Oh, Bree. Her voice was soft, but her knuckles whitened around her mug. They didn't even talk to me, just left a note. Said, if you want to stay, there's a garage. Clarissa's handwriting, of course. Marty sat very still. Darren let her do that? He didn't stop her, I replied. And then he texted me. Said, don't complicate this. As if I'm the problem. Her jaw tightened. I'll strangle him. With one of those velvet hangers she probably bought to match her personality. I gave a weak laugh. I thought if I kept helping them, I said, more to myself than her, they'd keep needing me. That need would become love. I thought if I stayed useful, they'd never push me away. They didn't just push you, Bree, Marty said. They shoved you into the margins of your own life. And you're still standing somehow. I paid every mortgage payment, I whispered. Every single one since Jeremy died. They never touched it. I just wanted the house to stay in the family. I never imagined I'd be the one kicked out of it. Because you're decent, she said. And you believed your son would be too. I swallowed. I know I should have used a lawyer. Everyone told me. But it felt cold, you know? It's your son. You don't think you need a contract to be treated like a human being. Marty reached over and took my hand. You didn't make a mistake by trusting them. They made a mistake by betraying you. Silence stretched again. And then she said, Vanessa told me they're planning to sell. I blinked. What? Your house. They're talking about staging it next week. I stared at her, unable to process. Darren told her they want to finally move somewhere modern, and Clarissa said, and I quote, the equity is wasted on that old place. We could make a killing right now. I couldn't breathe. They're selling my house? Marty nodded slowly. I didn't want to believe it either. But they've already talked to a listing agent. I felt my chest tighten. Not like a heart attack, no, this was deeper. It was my soul folding in on itself. The home Jeremy and I bought in 1988. The place where Darren learned to walk. Where we celebrated his graduation. Where we buried Jeremy's ashes under the dogwood tree in the backyard, the one that blooms every April without fail. They're going to erase me, I said aloud. From the house. From the story. From everything. You're not erased, Marty said sharply. You're still here. You're still you. They can take walls and furniture, but they don't get to take your worth. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just offering me a place to sleep. She was handing me a mirror, showing me a woman I'd forgotten I was. One who had held families together. One who paid bills and wiped tears and endured silently for the sake of peace. I sat back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. You know what the worst part is? I said, what? I knew. I saw it happening in pieces. When they replaced my coffee mugs. When they told me I didn't need to worry about holiday decorations this year. When Clarissa said my bedroom was too cluttered for guests. And I still tried to be easy. To be small. Because you love them, Marty said. But Bree, loving people doesn't mean letting them crush you. A long pause. And then I asked, what would you do? She looked me dead in the eyes. I'd call the bank. I'd stop that mortgage payment tonight. I'd talk to a lawyer. And I'd make sure those vultures never saw a cent from that house they didn't deserve. I stared at my cold tea. Jeremy would be so disappointed. No, she said firmly. Jeremy would be proud. He'd say, you gave them every chance. Now take your damn power back. I nodded. The dogwood tree. The Christmases. The nights reading to Darren in his race car bed. They were in me, not the drywall. And no matter how high the selling price, no open house could scrub away the shame of what they'd done. They're going to regret this, I said quietly. Marty smiled, slow and fierce. Now that's the Brianna I remember. I woke up in Marty's guest room to the comforting sound of her humming from the kitchen. The house was small, worn, and cozy, the kind that whispered stories rather than displayed them. There was a quilt over my legs, one I had made her for Christmas 4 years ago. I hadn't even remembered until now. Somehow she had known I'd need it. When I shuffled into the kitchen, Marty slid a warm plate toward me without a word. 2 fried eggs, a buttered biscuit, and a mug of black coffee that she didn't bother asking how I liked. It was just right. "We're seeing Grant today," she said, sipping her own coffee. "I haven't even brushed my teeth. You'll still be the most decent person in any room you walk into." Grant, her nephew, lived in a 1-story bungalow 2 streets over. His home office was sunlit and smelled faintly of peppermint and paper. He greeted me with a soft, genuine smile and a firm handshake, no lawyerly pomp, just kindness. "Tell me everything," he said. And I did. I told him about Jeremy and how we built the life in that house brick by emotional brick. About Darren, how he was a kind child who grew into a distant man. About Clarissa, who'd always kept me at arm's length, but whose disdain had lately calcified into something cruel. I explained the deed transfer after Jeremy died. They'd fallen on hard times, I said. I wanted to make it easier on them. I thought putting the house in their names would protect it for Darren's future. "And you continued paying the mortgage?" Grant asked, his pen poised. "Every month. Without fail. It comes out of my account automatically. They never once contributed, not even when Darren got a better job." He nodded, already scribbling notes. "That gives you a lot more ground than you think. We may be able to claim unjust enrichment, maybe even constructive trust depending on how the court sees it. Especially if we can show that you were led to believe you had the right to live there in return for your financial support." I stared at him. "So, I'm not crazy." "Not even close," he said. "Legally, it's murky. But courts don't like seeing elderly parents exploited by their kids. You're not a squatter, Brianna. You're the one who kept that house standing." He leaned forward, his expression serious now. "I suggest we start by sending a letter of intent. Not too aggressive. Just enough to remind them that this isn't over, and they may be liable for every penny you put in, plus damages, if they go through with the sale." Marty beamed beside me. "That's my boy." But I wasn't ready. "Not yet. I want to try one more time," I said. "To talk to Darren. Face to face. I want to give him a chance to be a decent son again, before I bring lawyers into it." Grant raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Your choice. But don't wait long. The market moves fast. If they're already working with a listing agent, time is ticking." By late afternoon, I was standing at my own front door again. I hadn't been back since that humiliating night. The dogwood tree in the front yard had begun to wilt under the August heat. The grass looked freshly cut, but I could tell it wasn't Darren's work. It was the landscaper I'd hired for years, the one Clarissa once called unnecessary. I took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened far too quickly, almost as if she'd been waiting. Clarissa stood there, barefoot, phone in one hand, glass of white wine in the other. She was dressed like she'd just stepped out of a home decor catalog, linen top, gold earrings, no sole. She gave me a look like I'd tracked mud across her precious hardwood floors. "Well," she said, voice flat, "you're persistent. Is Darren home?" I asked, forcing calm into my tone. "No," she said immediately. "And even if he was, he wouldn't want to talk. We've already been over this, Brianna. You left." "I was kicked out," I corrected. "To the garage." "That's not leaving, that's surviving." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Spare me the theatrics. We offered you a solution. You refused. Now you want to come back and cause drama?" I gripped the strap of my purse. "I came to talk to Darren, not you. And I'm telling you, Darren doesn't want to be caught in the middle of your," she waved her hand vaguely, meltdown. "We're trying to move on. By selling the house I paid for?" I snapped before I could stop myself. Her eyes narrowed. "So that's what this is about. Money." "No," I said, louder. "It's about respect. About not treating the person who raised your husband and kept your children from freezing in winter like she's a piece of broken furniture." She scoffed. "You think just because you paid a few bills, you own everything? You gave us that house. With the understanding I'd live there," I said. "You assumed. We never signed anything. You made your little payments because you wanted to. No one asked you to. Darren promised me. She stepped closer. Well, Darren isn't the man you remember anymore. And frankly, I'm tired of this poor old mom act. You're not a victim, Brianna. You're a control freak who can't let go. Something in me cracked. Not with pain, but with clarity. Thank you, I said quietly. She blinked. For what? For showing me exactly who you are. I turned and walked away, not because I'd lost, but because there was nothing left to say. Clarissa had made it clear my kindness had been mistaken for permission. My silence for weakness. But I wasn't silent anymore. And I wasn't weak. I had a lawyer. I had a case. And now I had a reason to fight like hell. When Grant hit send on the letter, something inside me shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There was no bolt of lightning, no earthquake, but it was real. Like I'd been holding my breath for 8 years and finally exhaled. The letter was direct. Not cruel, not threatening, just a clean, unmistakable declaration. I had contributed financially to the property for nearly a decade with the clear understanding that I had a right to reside there. Any attempt to sell without addressing my financial interest could constitute unjust enrichment and potential fraud. It offered one final opportunity to settle things amicably before formal legal proceedings began. 12 hours later, my phone rang. It was Darren. For a moment, I stared at the screen, surprised. Not because he called, but because I realized I no longer felt that pang in my chest when I saw his name. The dread was gone. What I felt now was caution. I picked up. Mom. His voice was tight, clipped, already on the defensive. I read the letter. And? What is this? Are you seriously going to drag us into court? I gave you a chance to talk to me face to face, I said calmly. You sent your wife to slam the door in mine. There was a pause. Look, I don't want to fight, he said. But this is ridiculous. You gave us that house, with the understanding that I would live there. Yeah, well, things change. You moved out. You pushed me out, I corrected. You left my things in the garage. You texted me, not to complicate things. He scoffed. This isn't about the garage. You've always needed to be in control. You treat that house like it's your museum. Clarissa's just trying to make it feel like ours. I paid every mortgage payment since 2017, Darren, I said. That's not just generosity. That's investment. That's ownership. If not in name, then in equity. You did that on your own, he snapped. We never asked for it. No, you didn't. You just expected it. Another pause. A longer one. You really stopped the payments? Yes, but what about the mortgage? The credit? That's your responsibility now. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the blood rushing to his head. Clarissa and I are applying for a new car loan, he said, voice beginning to crack. We need our credit in good shape. Then I suggest you start making those payments. You can't just walk away. I didn't walk away, Darren. I was shoved out. Quietly. With cruelty. And I still gave you every opportunity to fix it. He was breathing heavier now. Angry, but underneath it, panic. Clarissa didn't mean it like that, you know. The note. The garage. You overreacted. I had to laugh. Not because it was funny. Because the denial was so pitiful. No, Darren. I underreacted for too long. But I'm done now. I won't fund my own humiliation. That's when his tone changed. So what, you want money? Is that what this is about? It was like a knife to the heart. But I didn't flinch. I want respect. I want acknowledgement. But since that clearly means nothing to you, I'll settle for justice. And I hung up. The minute I placed the phone down, Marty appeared in the doorway of the living room like a hawk. Well, she asked. He panicked, I said. He didn't expect me to actually pull the plug. Marty nodded slowly. Of course not. He thought you'd keep playing the same role. Mother. Martyr. Safety net. I stared out the window at her street, quiet, lined with houses that looked lived in. Real homes, not showpieces. He actually said I was overreacting, I said. Marty scoffed. You could burn their throw pillows and crash their wine tastings and still be underreacting. That made me laugh. For the first time in days, a real laugh. We spent the next several hours going through old bank statements and receipts, emails from Darren where he'd mentioned the mortgage, even holiday text messages where he thanked me vaguely for keeping things afloat. Each line of data was a nail, steady, cold, and damning. Grant came by that afternoon with a briefcase and a quiet fire in his eyes. "You have a strong case," he said. "If they don't settle, I'm confident we'll get a ruling in your favor, especially if they proceed with listing the property without notifying you." "What about the mortgage company?" I asked. "Let them deal with Darren now," he said. "The account is tied to your payment history, yes, but the name on the deed is theirs. It's time he takes responsibility." There was something poetic about it. They had clawed and scraped to get full control of the house, and now they had it. With every bill, every late fee, every sleepless night that used to be my burden, I was handing it all back. By the end of the week, I had a new bank account. My utilities were unlinked. I had to consult with a therapist, someone Marty recommended. We even went to brunch on Sunday, and for once, I didn't check my phone or wonder if I'd overstayed my welcome in someone else's life. I was building something again. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Peanut, Marty's dog, had started sleeping by my door at night. She said he only did that when he trusted someone. "Must sense you're coming back to life," she said one morning, handing me a cup of coffee. Or maybe he just knows a good woman when he sees one. I took the cup with a smile. I was tired, but I was strong. And for the first time in years, I wasn't someone's backup plan. I was Brianna Hayward. And I was done being erased. When the call from the bank came, I was folding laundry in Marty's guest room, a simple task that somehow felt like reclaiming control. One sock at a time, I was putting the scattered pieces of my life back together. The number was unfamiliar. "Mrs. Hayward?" the voice asked. "Yes, this is Angela Reyes from Fairhome Financial. I'm calling regarding the mortgage on 2418 Ocala Lane. May I confirm your identity?" I froze halfway through folding a pillowcase. "Yes, this is Brianna Hayward." "Thank you. I wanted to reach out to confirm some details regarding the payment history on the mortgage account. We've been conducting an internal review and your name came up." My pulse quickened. "I'm no longer listed on the deed, but I've been paying the mortgage for the past 8 years. Angela paused, the kind of pause you recognize from professionals who've just discovered something deeply unfair. "That's what we found, yes. We reviewed the records. The payments came exclusively from your personal account. In fact, your payment history has been perfect since February 2017. I said nothing. I didn't need to. It was all in the silence between us. "I'm reaching out," she continued, "because there is an option available to you, should you choose to pursue legal action. You may qualify for an equitable lien or constructive trust over the property. This would place a legal hold on the house during litigation. I can stop them from selling it?" "Yes," she said firmly. "If you file a formal claim, we can attach a notice of interest to the title. That means no sale, no refinance, no transfer until the matter is resolved in court." A warmth bloomed in my chest. Power. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like. "And one more thing," she added, her voice dipping. "Your son, Mr. Hayward, called us last week. He appeared confused. He claimed he was unaware of the actual structure of the mortgage." I blinked. "Unaware?" Angela sighed. "Yes. He seemed to believe the mortgage was either on autopay through escrow or somehow managed by a joint fund. When we explained that his mother, you, had been solely responsible for 8 years, he went silent. I closed my eyes. My grip on the pillowcase tightened. He didn't even know. I whispered. He never looked. Never asked. "I can't comment on family dynamics," Angela said gently, but from a financial standpoint, he seemed shocked. And now, understandably, he's concerned. If you've truly stopped payments, the burden is on him. I thanked her, hung up. Then I laughed just once. A short, breathless sound that had nothing to do with humor. He didn't even know. 8 years of automatic withdrawals. 8 years of checks. 8 years of prioritizing their bills over my retirement, my health, my peace of mind, and he had no idea. He never asked where the money came from. He just let it appear month after month, like a spoiled child who thinks the refrigerator stocks itself. Clarissa, I was certain, had known. But Darren? He had drifted so far from the son I raised, he didn't even recognize the hands holding up his life. I told Marty over tea that afternoon. She didn't even blink. Of course he didn't know, she said, dunking a biscotti into her mug. That boy hasn't managed his own shoes since middle school. Clarissa's been playing puppeteer for years. I'm just stunned, I admitted. All this time, I thought he was choosing to look the other way. But he wasn't even looking. Same outcome, Free. Whether he knew and didn't care or didn't know because he didn't care to ask, same result. You're the one who paid, and they're the ones who tried to cut you out. That part was true. But now, I said, straightening, they're going to learn exactly who they underestimated. Grant came by that evening, and when I relayed the bank call, he grinned. Perfect, he said. We'll file the notice of interest first thing tomorrow. They won't be able to touch the property without hitting that red flag. He pulled out his laptop and began typing. And this time, we'll submit it with copies of your payment statements. All 8 years of them. I hope it scares them, I said. And I meant it. Good, Marty muttered. It should. Later that night, I sat on the bed with my laptop open. The screen glowed gently, and I stared at it for a long time before moving my fingers to the keyboard. Jobs for seniors near me. The words felt foreign, but right. I had no delusions of grandeur. I wasn't trying to reinvent myself or make a fortune. I just wanted to feel useful again on my terms. Not because someone needed a babysitter. Not because the bills were unpaid. But because I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet again. I'd lived my entire life doing things for others. Now it was time to do something for me. I applied to a receptionist job at a dental office 2 blocks from Marty's place. I knew the area. I knew the phone systems. And I liked people, even after all this. Then I sent an application to the local library for a part-time shelving assistant. And another to a florist shop I used to visit years ago, back when Darren still brought me tulips on Mother's Day. It felt strange, brave, like stepping outside after a storm to see the sun again. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling, my mind drifting through all the versions of myself I'd forgotten. The girl who sewed her own prom dress. The young mother who stayed up all night building Darren's science fair volcano. The wife who held her husband's hand as he died and then held everything else together after he was gone. I wasn't lost. I was returning to myself. The cafe had become more than a job. It was my little kingdom. Each morning, I unlocked the doors before sunrise, flipped the sign to open, and let in the day with the smell of warm croissants and fresh coffee. The regulars greeted me with nods and smiles, slowly learning my name and laughing at my dry humor. They didn't know my story, and I liked it that way. At the cafe, I wasn't the woman whose son threw her into a garage. I was Brianna, the woman who knew everyone's order by heart and who wiped tables with quiet pride. And then one morning, as I poured a cup of black coffee from Mr. Langley, I felt it. A shift in the air. A presence behind me. I turned, and there he was. Darren, my son, alone. Hair slightly messy, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He looked tired. Older than 38. Not just from age, but from pressure, from a life that was unraveling faster than he could patch it. I met his eyes. He didn't speak, just gave a faint nod, like a child unsure if he should be here. I handed Mr. Langley his coffee and stepped out from behind the counter, signaling to Darren to follow me. We sat in the corner booth, the one furthest from the windows, tucked in shadow. I took off my apron and folded my hands in my lap. Darren swallowed. I didn't know where else to find you. I raised an eyebrow. Marty's house is 2 blocks away. I didn't want to see her. I figured she'd throw something at me. She might. He gave a weak smile, then looked down at his hands, fingers twisting together. We're struggling, he said finally. The bank won't return my calls. The lien you filed, it froze everything. We can't sell. We can't refinance. Clarissa's furious. I'm not surprised, I said calmly. She says we should never have let you near the finances, he continued. That we should have refinanced in our own name years ago. That this is your way of punishing us. And what do you say, Darren? He hesitated. I say, we messed up. I didn't reply. I just waited. He rubbed his temples. Look, Mom, I know things got out of hand. I know the garage was wrong. And I'm sorry. But Clarissa and we're underwater. We need help. Still married, I see, I said dryly. That earned a small grimace. She wanted me to come ask if you'd consider resuming the payments, just until we get back on our feet. And where would I live? I asked, already knowing the answer. Well, we were thinking, maybe it's time you considered something more stable, predictable. I narrowed my eyes. What does that mean? A retirement community, he said quickly. One of the nice ones. With gardens, activities. You could meet people, Mom. Make friends. You wouldn't have to work, and you wouldn't have to deal with me. No, that's not what I meant. You want me to go from your garage to an institution, I said flatly. But you want me to keep paying your mortgage in the meantime. He flinched. That's not fair. No, Darren, you're not fair. The silence sat heavy between us. He looked around the cafe, like seeing it for the first time. The clean tables, the happy customers. The woman his mother had become outside of his orbit. You really like it here, he asked quietly. I like being needed for who I am, not what I give. He nodded slowly. So what now? I took a deep breath. I'm willing to resume the payments, I said, but only under one condition. His eyes flicked to mine. Anything. You sell me the house. Legally. Fully. I'll pay a fair price. I've already spoken to Grant. The bank will support it. We'll handle the paperwork properly this time. He blinked. You want to buy it? I want to own what I've already paid for. I want it in my name, not as a gift, not as a favor, not as a loophole. I'll make the payments, but it'll be my house. But we live there. You didn't treat it like a home, I said coldly. You treated it like an asset. A staging ground for Clarissa's little projects. A source of money. You evicted me from my life and called it convenience. He swallowed. She won't like this. She doesn't have to. She's not on the loan, remember. His head dropped into his hands. I don't want to fight you, he whispered. I'm not fighting, I said gently. I'm drawing a boundary. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Grant drafted a proposal. Fair market price, minus my financial contributions over the years. You'll still come out with equity, but I'll come out with my life. He took the paper slowly. Read it. Said nothing. I'll give you 1 week, I said. Talk to her. Talk to whoever you need to. But if you refuse, the lien stays, and I let the legal process do the rest. No more phone calls. No more conversations. Just courtrooms and judges. He looked up, his eyes glassy. I miss you, he said softly. I miss the version of you that saw me as more than an obstacle. He nodded. Slowly. Then he stood. I'll call you. Good. He walked out of the cafe, shoulders slumped under the weight of his own choices. And I sat back in the booth, feeling more steady than I had in years. Because it was no longer their house, their rules, their world. It was mine. The air in Grant's office was thick with tension, yet beneath it all was an unmistakable current of justice waiting to be claimed. The walls were lined with shelves full of legal tomes, and the soft hum of the air conditioner mixed with the faint scent of lavender and old paper. It was a quiet sanctuary, a battlefield for words and truth. I sat at the large oak table, fingers intertwined, heart steady, but pounding beneath my ribs. Across from me were Darren and Clarissa. Darren looked pale, his shirt slightly rumpled, and his tie loosened. The weight of the situation had aged him beyond his 38 years. Clarissa, ever the picture of control, sat rigid with arms crossed, eyes sharp and guarded. Grant, poised and professional, opened the meeting with an even tone. Thank you all for coming. To summarize the matter, Mrs. Hayward is prepared to resume mortgage payments, only on the condition that the property at 2418 Oak Hollow Lane is sold to her at its residual value, effectively the remaining mortgage balance. Clarissa's eyes flashed with disbelief. Excuse me? You expect us to sell our house to her for just what's left on the mortgage? That's preposterous. I met her gaze evenly. I'm offering what I've actually paid over the years. Nearly 80% of the total mortgage payments were made by me, not you. Darren looked away, jaw clenched. I could see the internal conflict writ plain on his face. Clarissa scoffed. This is robbery disguised as justice. The house is worth 3 times that. We built a life there. Not without my support, I replied. You used my money. You used my goodwill. And you pushed me out of my home. Her voice dropped into a hiss. This is nothing but a vendetta, a desperate woman clawing back what she didn't earn. Wrong, I said firmly. I earned every cent, every brick, every memory. But you erased me. That's why I'm here. Grant interjected smoothly. Mrs. Hayward has strong legal grounds for a claim of unjust enrichment and breach of implied contract. The documentation of mortgage payments in her name, coupled with communications about her right to reside there, supports her position. Clarissa turned sharply to Darren as if demanding reassurance. He swallowed hard. It's true. I didn't manage the finances. I relied on Mom to keep things afloat. I didn't realize how deeply. Clarissa shot him a glare. And now you want to give in? It's not about giving in, Darren said quietly. We can't sell. We can't refinance with that lien in place. The bank is pressuring us. If we fight, we risk losing everything. Clarissa's lips tightened. Then what are we supposed to do? Hand over our family home? You don't have a choice, Grant said. The lien prevents any sale or refinance until this is resolved. Litigation could be costly, public, and lengthy. Clarissa slammed her fist lightly on the table. I won't sign anything that feels like surrender. Grant's gaze hardened. Mrs. Hayward is prepared to proceed with a full legal claim if necessary, citing elder financial abuse and breach of verbal agreement. This will expose all relevant financial records and communications, including the garage incident. Clarissa paled slightly. You're ruthless, she spat. You wear the victim like armor. I wore silence and sacrifice, I said quietly. Now I wear truth and boundaries. There was a long silence, heavy and dense. Slowly, Clarissa reached for the pen. Darren followed. They signed. The weight of years lifted, if only slightly. As I stepped out of the lawyer's office, the afternoon sun felt like a balm. The air smelled fresher. The streets quieter somehow, as if the world paused in recognition of this small victory. Marty was waiting outside with a broad grin and 2 glasses of sparkling cider. To Brianna Hayward, she toasted, Queen of Oak Hollow Lane. We clinked glasses, and I felt the first genuine smile in years stretch across my face. I'm not just surviving anymore, I said softly. I'm living. On my own terms. Marty squeezed my hand. And it's about time. That evening, back at Marty's house, I sat alone on the porch, the lemon cake resting untouched beside me. I stared up at the stars, feeling the fullness of everything I'd lost and everything I was reclaiming. For years, I'd thought love meant endless giving. Now I knew it meant respect, boundaries, and fighting for yourself when no one else would. I was Brianna Hayward. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. The moment I turned the key in the lock, the weight of years pressed against me, but this time, it was different. This time, the key wasn't just opening a door. It was unlocking a future that had long felt out of reach. 2418, Oak Hollow Lane. My home. Officially, legally, and undeniably mine. The front door creaked softly as it swung open, revealing the familiar hallway bathed in the gentle glow of late afternoon sun. Dust motes danced in the air like little memories, swirling and settling, waiting to be caught and cherished. I stepped inside slowly, soaking in the silence, not the cold void I had known before, but a quiet that whispered promise. I paused to run my hand along the banister Jeremy had polished every year. The grooves felt smooth under my fingertips, like an old friend's embrace. The living room was still bare, the walls pale and waiting. I pulled the curtains aside, letting in the light, and smiled when the sun caught the chipped edges of the fireplace mantel. Jeremy's old clock sat atop it, still ticking, still stubbornly alive. I made my way to the kitchen, where the faint smell of lemon cleaner lingered from long ago. I imagined the Sunday breakfasts, the spilled coffee, the laughter of a boy who had once called this place home. There was work to be done. Boxes I had stored in Marty's basement were now unpacked one by one. I set out Jeremy's favorite armchair in the corner where it belonged, its fabric worn but welcoming. The quilts I'd sewn years ago found their places draped over sofas and beds. The walls, once dull, now blossomed with warm colors, soft golds, rich reds, and gentle greens, bringing life and comfort back to rooms that had been numbed by neglect. I hung framed photos of family birthdays and vacations, the smile of a younger Darren looking back at me with innocence long gone. Each item I placed was an act of reclaiming, a stitch in the fabric of a new chapter. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky painted itself in soft pinks and purples, Marty arrived at the door. She carried a basket brimming with homemade soup, crusty bread, and a bottle of deep red wine. We settled into the kitchen, the heart of the home, and as we ate, the warmth of the food mingled with the warmth of old friendship. To new beginnings, Marty toasted, her voice steady and hopeful. I lifted my glass, feeling the weight of those words sink in. For years, I had been silenced, dismissed, and discarded. But here, in this house, surrounded by familiar things and true friends, I found my voice again. I was no longer a victim of my past, no longer a shadow in my own life. I was the mistress of my home, the keeper of its stories, and the author of its future. As the night deepened, the lights dimmed, and the quiet settled over us like a gentle blanket, I realized I had found something precious, peace. Not just in the house, but inside me. There was room for healing here, room for joy, room for me. And as I looked around at the worn furniture, the glowing lamp, the cracked mug in my hand, I knew this was just the beginning. It was a quiet afternoon when the knock came, a soft, hesitant sound that didn't belong to the usual visitors I'd grown used to seeing at my doorstep. When I opened the door, there stood Darren. His face was lined with fatigue, eyes shadowed by worry, and his usual confident posture was replaced by something more uncertain, more vulnerable. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him in. The house, the one I had fought so hard to reclaim, felt alive around us. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patches across the hardwood floors. I could feel the weight of the years behind us, but also the fragile possibility of what might come. We sat down in the living room, the same room where years ago, memories had been made and broken. After a long silence, Darren finally spoke. "We didn't get the house we wanted," he confessed. "Clarissa and we're living in a rented apartment now. Smaller than the house, yes, but it's all we can afford." I nodded, the news settling over me like dust. I'd expected no less. Then came the real surprise, the words that changed the atmosphere in the room. "Clarissa's pregnant," he said, voice softer this time, almost reverent. "She's due in the spring." The announcement hung between us like a fragile crystal, beautiful but delicate, threatening to shatter with the slightest wrong move. "Congratulations," I managed, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside. He smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Thanks. But I'm worried, Mom. With all that's happened, I'm afraid you might lose contact with your granddaughter. That things might get even more complicated." I looked at him, searching for the boy I once knew, the little boy who'd cried on my shoulder and trusted me implicitly. "Darren," I said gently, "I didn't choose a house over family. I chose self-respect. I chose not to be erased. I chose not to be a ghost in my own life." He met my gaze, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know," he whispered, "and I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with the weight of years and unspoken regrets. "I won't apologize for standing my ground," I continued, "nor for protecting my dignity." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't know what the future holds, Mom," he said finally, "but maybe this is a new beginning. A chance for us to rebuild slowly, carefully." I felt a cautious hope blossom within me. "A dialogue," I said. "That's where it starts." He smiled, a real one this time, tentative but sincere. And as we sat there, mother and son, imperfect and bruised, I realized something important. Family isn't always about perfect harmony or easy love. Sometimes it's about the willingness to try, even when the path is uncertain, even when the heart is wary. Because hope, fragile as it may be, is still worth holding on to. The sun dipped low behind the trees as I pulled into Marty's driveway. The familiar creak of the wooden gate sounded like an old friend welcoming me home. Tonight was special, not because of what was on the calendar, but because of who would fill the rooms inside. Friends. My chosen family. It wasn't lost on me how different this felt from the gatherings of years past, the strained smiles, the forced pleasantries, the sense that I was always just a guest in my own life. Tonight was different. Here, I was surrounded by people who really saw me, and loved me anyway. The living room glowed warmly with soft lamps and flickering candles. Marty bustled around the kitchen, setting out plates of food, her famous roasted vegetables, warm bread from the bakery down the street, and bowls of homemade soup that smelled like comfort itself. Grant was leaning against the doorway, grinning as he joked with Celeste, who'd arrived with a box of cookies wrapped in a cheerful red ribbon. One by one, they greeted me with hugs and smiles. "Brianna," Marty exclaimed, pulling me into a bear hug. "Look at you. You're glowing." "I feel like I'm finally breathing again," I admitted. We settled into the living room, glasses raised in a toast. "To Brianna," Marty said, her eyes bright. "For fighting for herself, for never giving up, and for the new life she's building." The clink of glasses was like a bell ringing clear and true. Stories and laughter flowed as freely as the wine. Marty regaled us with tales of a disastrous bake sale where everything that could go wrong did, her messy kitchen, a fire alarm triggered by too many cookies, and the dog sneaking off with a batch of stolen cupcakes. Everyone laughed until tears streaked their cheeks. Grant surprised us all with a poem he'd written, a tribute to resilience and second chances. His words resonated deeply, like a balm to old wounds and a spark of hope for the future. Celeste, always the nurturer, insisted everyone take some of her cookies home. "A little sweetness for the journey," she said, smiling softly. As the evening grew quieter, I slipped outside to the garden. The air was cool and fragrant with the scent of roses and jasmine, blooming under the soft glow of string lights. This garden was Jeremy's legacy, the place where we'd celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet afternoons. I sank down onto the worn wooden bench beneath the dogwood tree, where Jeremy's ashes lay beneath the soil. The branches above whispered gently in the breeze, like an old friend's comforting voice. Memories flooded back, the feel of Jeremy's hand in mine, the sound of his laughter, the way he'd tuck me in on cold nights. Though my son was distant, though the family I'd once known was fractured beyond repair, I felt whole in this moment. I had reclaimed more than a house. I'd reclaimed myself, and that was the greatest victory of all. The sky above shifted from deep blue to a canvas of stars. One by one, they appeared silent witnesses to endings and beginnings. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. This was no longer just survival. This was life, on my terms. And it was only the beginning.